Great. Yeah, Bayview Landscape Architecture is 18 years old. We have evolved from a uh, strictly sort of a luxury residential focused firm now into much more of a balanced residential firm and a urban design firm. So I've really enjoyed over the last 3 to 5 years really concentrating on growing the community design as we've branded on the website. So it's sort of better represented in both those arenas. It really, the diversity of the industry is what really speaks to me, and the opportunity to design for many different end users. So even when we went through a rebranding in the last couple of years, it was important to me that was really represented well in the website, in our marketing efforts, and so even from, for example, from landing on our website homepage, really sort of you can go one direction or the other. Design for family and design for community are the way we've termed those two different arenas. So
How did you make what caused the jump to doing the more of the urban planning stuff from taking the from the residential stuff jumping over to the urban planning side of things? Was that a change in the company? Was it something that you've always been interested in? How did that come about?
yeah, a few reasons actually. One would be I physically actually have lived in New York City the entirety of owning Bayview Landscape Architecture. So always the urban environment always spoke to me, but frankly, it was a little intimidating to know sort of how to break into that since I had such a strong start in the residential realm, typically on Long Island, which is and the Hamptons, which are suburbs of New York City. But it always, the urban environment always spoke to me. Always felt there was a really unique opportunity for landscape architects in the urban fabric. So I always knew I wanted to try and get in that arena, but sort of didn't really know how earlier in my career. So as the company evolved and we were sort of on year 13, 14, it seemed like sort of the right time to diversify also for sort of economic
Yeah.
stability, not being exclusively a residential company, but having some ability to show our skill set in the design for community. So we were contacted to participate in some RFPs for some larger scale urban work, which there's something called the PACT program, PACT, which effectively is the New York City Housing Authority partnering with private developers and property managers to help renovate some of the affordable housing campuses throughout the five boroughs of New York City. So we're fortunate enough to get pulled in on a few RFPs for those. We won those. We were awarded those RFPs with those development companies, and that really was a great launching pad into some urban design opportunities, and just expanded our scale of project dramatically. From a single family home to a 10 building campus at 3,500 residents. So it was really very exciting and that's just been the last couple of years.
Yeah, you mentioned qualifying for those RFPs and getting, I guess, the team together for that. Did that come out of your? I'm kind of thinking on the developer side, right? You team up with the developer or homeowners to do the residential stuff. Did that sort of grow out of that, or was it more you guys say there's an RFP, let's go, let's get after it, doing that type of thing, or how did that develop?
Yeah, my specific path actually came. It was born from the residential side. We actually had success for a family uh, on the residential side that actually owned a larger scale development company. So after doing their private homes, an opportunity came up on their urban multifamily projects. So that was the first one. And then that one we met an architecture firm that works at that scale. That architecture firm brought us in with a new developer on the second project. And it sort of trickled that way, met an architect, met a developer, passed along to an architect. So it happened very organically, but pretty quickly. But
Yeah,
yeah, so it was actually pretty cool.
it starts with those relationships, right? The initial sort of, yeah. No, that's that. The organic way seems to be the way that a lot of these things grow. Going back to Bayview, you said you've been in business for 18 years,
Yes.
right? Um, what? How did that company start off? Did you go into the company with it already being sort of fully formed? Were you part of that initial sort of getting everything started? How did that come about when you what startup?
Yeah, I effectively, after college, really only had, I've had two jobs since 1996. Uh, One was for a really special landscape design build firm that focused in residential design and construction. That's where I apprenticed under licensed landscape architect, sat for my exams, and really worked for 10 years for a small company that grew quite a bit in those 10 years, but was really fortunate enough to learn almost every component of what uh, a landscape design company is, what needs to be, interaction with contractors, running the business itself, the design components, engaging with clients. It was really just amazing opportunities. It was a smaller firm, so I was over the course of just a few years really given enormous amount of responsibility and diversity in my tasks. So truly, after 10 years, I was, we're, 7, 8, 9 years, I was starting to sort of get the itch that, I learned quite a bit. Um, I always had the voice in my ear of my grandfather, who was an Italian immigrant, but when he came to this country and ultimately worked his way up from literally the stock room to the owning the company, eventually, of sort of, his advice was always, you're only going to find true happiness and success ultimately working for yourself. When you have a passion, when if you're lucky enough to, sort of to find your niche, find your place in the world, and in a profession that really speaks to you, the most gratifying way to participate in that is ultimately own your own business. A lot, obviously, of stresses and roller coaster, of emotions, but at the end of the day, owning your own company is really, extremely rewarding. And so I truly had him in my ear, and roughly about year 10 with that other company, on my honeymoon with my now wife of 18 years. It's sort of, we were just kind of discussing where it was all going and sort of on the high of getting married and starting this new life together, and really felt that it was time, that I was ready. We had just sort of gotten married, so we felt it was just the right opportunity. That if I was going to sort of knew it was going to take a few years to get off the ground, but that was really just a great time to do it. So that was 18 years ago, and I haven't looked back.
Nice. Yeah. Did you have any maybe working with that other company any kind of insight into how to run a business and the businessy part of things? Because I know I never took any kind of business 101 class during my school years, right? So that was all pretty brand new to me going into it. Did you have anything like that, or was it more of a kind of a school of hard knocks type of thing?
Yeah, no, great question, and that's definitely, I would say, shortcoming in the in the landscape architecture education arena for sure. Um, I had the client relations part, which I think is crucial. Effectively, we're only have the opportunity with clients that believe in us and trust us. So that part I did have experience with, which I think is vital. Also, how to understand people, how to read people, how to speak to them, and sort of in what they value. So that part I felt I had sort of a lot. I gained a ton of in those 10 years. But actually, the nuts and bolts of, am I going to be an S corp, a C corp, LLC, PC? Those things I certainly didn't. But I had some good starting off small. In fact, it was just me and one designer that I in the early years, and good accountant, and really helped me sort of figure some of those things out early on. But yeah, definitely that's school of hard knocks, for sure.
Yeah, that's stuff that especially once you start to get into it, the accounting, the payroll, all that taxes, all that stuff is definitely got to have somebody to help you out with that stuff and get it done right. Otherwise, there's
It,
that can cause problems.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, trust your consultants.
yeah,
Don't think you can know what you know and know what you don't know. I
yeah,
would say is
exactly. Yeah,
is
don't
good
be
advice
afraid to
there.
ask for help, right? Or get some help with the stuff you don't know too much about. Um, uh, on your how big is Bayview? How many people do you have working for you guys now? You said you started off with the two. Where are you at now?
Yeah, we're currently six in total. We sort of expansion mode. We hired two people earlier in 2024 that have really worked out really, really well. And one was a senior staff member who's now sort of really taken an active role in sort of running our younger staff, which has sort of freed me up quite nicely to do a little more business development and work a little bit more on that business side, uh, which I'm happy to say I have now learned over the course of 18 years of hard knocks. So feel much better equipped, to handle those components and really grow the business that way. I've
Okay.
built a great team I'm super proud of. We have really nice culture, and now I'm able to really go out and spread the word to
Yeah.
those that need us.
I would imagine that that helps a lot with balancing out that creative design with the practical side of things, right? You're not it doesn't it's not as much of butting heads, right, so to speak, but now you can kind of spread it out and have that team kind of help out with I would imagine both sides of those. Speaking of the company itself, what is the company structure? Do you think you mentioned is it an S corporation that you guys have
It
going?
is an S corp.
Okay.
It is an S
Um,
corp. Yeah.
yeah. And how do you go about a lot of our listeners are students, right? They're going through the course right now, studying to be landscape architects, or they're just sort of starting out their careers in landscape architecture. At Bayview, uh, what does that look like for someone coming in as a entry level? You have 6 employees. Uh, are there any? I would imagine you have somebody at the entry level. Maybe you offer some kind of internship. What does that look like for them coming in? What can they expect to see as far as the type of workload that they do, um, the types of projects they get to work on? Is that something you can kind of speak to a little bit?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we're actually at the infancy of actually bringing on our first intern in a formalized intern capacity. We've had interns and shadows in the past. Uh, I do try to afford myself opportunities. I graduated from Cornell University's landscape architecture program, so I stay connected there, and they'll send us interns or again shadows interns.
Yeah,
But we haven't had a formalized program
yeah,
to date. But literally, a 2024 initiative was to really develop a uh, established internship program that would afford. In fact, we're doing a 12-week program that really, that the team member will be in the office, for that duration, and a real model, clear kind of week one, week two,
got it.
through week 12, what they can expect. Really feel it's a great opportunity to obviously meet new people, have them, sort of learn the industry. And I'm also understand that we'll sort of, I feel like they'll teach us a bit. They'll expose us to some things that they're sort of learning at the front lines of sort of learning and new technologies and such. So we're sort of excited to kick that off in early 2025, um, and that will hopefully also sort of grow our pool of candidates uh, to be employees. I mean, I love nothing more than for sort of young team members to grow into sort of senior team members. Another component that we've really just sort of formalized at the end of this past year is sort of really defining what the company sort of growth ladder is. I feel that it's important to eliminate some of the murkiness of sort of what someone's role is, what's their, where are they entering the company, where might they be able to go with the company. I try and make sure everyone knows. I mean, truly, it's a limitless opportunities. I want people to grow as much as they can grow and want to grow, and what. So really spelling that out in a formalized way, I think, was important. So that's something we actually spend a good amount of time on. Um, I was able to spend more time on since I hired that senior person earlier in
Yeah,
the year. So that's all
nice.
sort of hand in hand. Some of these, kind of infrastructural components we're able to really dig our fingers into, which I felt like I really didn't have time to in the past when I was really more running the real day to day. So um, that's really been very positive. Um, yeah. So right now we sort of have the 3 younger team members that uh, hopefully now sort of have a clear path, and will
Yeah.
ultimately be able to sort of feed under them potentially with sort of the interns. So um, yeah, we want people to really eliminate some of the murkiness around that process, and offer clarity.
Do you have a like a plan as how big or how small you want to keep the company? Is there a goal that you want to meet that you're kind of looking forward to kind of getting to? Um,
Yeah, it's a great question. We do. I mean, that's it's funny. Sort of the number of staff always seem like an odd metric, of sorts. Obviously, if you sort of, the most general concept is I'm happy to grow the staff as big as the work allows. So I sort of don't have any trepidation like, oh gosh, over 10 is really, that's seems scary kind of thing. So that's, uh, I'm happy sort of for, limitless growth. But the direct answer to your question, I see it somewhere in the 10 to 12, 14. We ultimately would love to have sort of a real real senior principal level for the two arenas that we're in, the luxury
Yeah.
residential design and the design for community. So at a minimum, sort of those two foundational components. We have a great director of operations, which is also vitally important. So with those sort of three senior members and potentially a fourth, that would be sort of urban design and planning. So, and then filling the tree from there. So,
Yeah.
right there is 4 to 5 plus all the people under there. I could certainly see it being,
Right.
again, 10, 15 plus. It would really be a nice size. That would,
Yeah. And as you bring more projects in for the different types, you'd have, hopefully the idea is to get multiple teams under those types of projects, right? Speaking of the on the urban planning side of things, is it more on the um, sort of housing projects? Are you going after sort of things that are public works related, parks, streetscapes, things like that? Is it all kind of a part of that, or are you strictly focused on the housing? How does it balance it out?
sure. I would say it's, it's all a part of what we'd like to be doing.
Yeah.
Part of what I love about this industry is that diversity and the size, scale, scope, uh, end user demographics, geography, the sites, unique qualities. So, that's just something I love about the industry, and I assume a lot of people getting into it would feel the same. But I think a niche that we're really looking to explore in the short term would be the affordable housing campuses. Uh, the couple that we've been able to participate in so far have been incredibly rewarding. Those specifically are for people whose voices have been neglected over many decades, and now this is really an opportunity to uh, really create some special environments, and a substantial amount of funding is going into these rehabilitations. So it's really exciting to be a part of them, to engage in the tenant participation, to really hear the voices of those that are going to ultimately use these spaces. So it's really just a rewarding scale to work at. So that is going to be, I think, the focus for the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. Given the density in New York, especially in these urban areas, uh, are your projects, you mentioned they're more on the renovation side of things, you know, where you guys refer to them as infill projects where it's you're renovating an empty lot right in the middle of the city. Is that typically the type of work you're seeing, or is it more, because I feel like those projects tend to not not typically, but they would tend to sort of leave out, especially in housing where you need that space for living spaces, that they maybe limit the amount of landscape that goes in there, whether it's at ground level or at the rooftop podium levels. Is that the type of work you're seeing? Is it more, are you seeing any sort of movement or any sort of acceptance of larger open public spaces or not public but common spaces?
Yeah, I have to say, I'm pleased with the what I feel the role of the landscape architect is uh, in new construction and even the renovation work. But in the sort of the New York City area, uh, I think the outdoor amenity spaces for sort of new construction are really heavily valued. They're recognizable as uh, optimum return on investment. You sort of have to speak to the client. If our client is a developer, that developer is going to want to get a return on their investment.
Sure.
That's sort of the
The whole point.
nuts and bolts of of,
Yeah.
of what makes the world go round.
Right.
But if we're that's sort of why we like to speak the language of our client, and understand what sort of makes them tick and what they value, and if having they're recognizing that a improved outdoor amenity space, whether it's a rooftop, whether it's whatever their site offers, the most well appointed, the most detailed, the most pleasant place to be is going to have a positive impact on the residents. Uh, if it's a residential, building, occupancy and tenant retention and sort of general tenant happiness and that happiness associated with that developer's name, that it's one of their projects that is known as having such spaces that sort of
Yeah.
just generates sort of positive public image. So I think actually I'm really pleased with I think the role of landscape architect is in development
Yeah.
and rehabilitation
Yeah.
throughout New York.
Yeah. We've seen it. I've seen it here grow a lot more in the past decade or so, where there's a lot more attention put to those spaces, right? Where it's seen rather than seen as a leftover space, it's more, yes, this is going to be something that we can expand on, and it'll just be a benefit to the project. Um,
Is your
yeah,
experience more in single family work versus?
it's kind of all over the place. I've worked with firms that have focused specifically on schools. That was kind of one of my first jobs. Was a lot of elementary and high schools, where we did took care of all the obviously all the landscape portion of it. But yeah, I've worked with companies that have solely focused on multifamily projects throughout Southern California, and then other companies that have the majority of the work was in public works, right? So it's a good mix, which is what I'm trying to do here. It's kind of mixed it up a little bit with everything. Um, the residential side of things is usually on the new construction type of work, not necessarily renovations, although that does come through every once in a while. Yeah, it's kind of, I've started working in 2006, 2007, and ever since then it's been kind of getting some experience here and there on the different types of projects, which has been, that's kind of how I looked at starting my company, is bringing all that, and obviously on the smaller scale to start off with, but diversifying that way, and trying to keep it as much as I can, as diversified as I can. Although that comes with challenges, because it's, it's a lot of it's a lot of either you're either working on a public works project for some time, and that kind of eats up a lot of your time, or you're doing the multifamily housing, and that it just depends on what comes through. Um, with the
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it does. How you set up the office structure. Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah, and it's that again, it's a good thing. It's a good problem to have, because then you can start looking at what I'm doing, what I've been doing, and starting to look at bringing people in on, to hop out with production as contractors, but now more so setting up that possibility of having them coming in as employees and start to grow the company, right? Where coming in 5 years, I think it's getting to the point where I'm going to start to bring some more people in to help out with that stuff. Yeah, yeah,
that's an exciting time. I've found personally, I think you're going to see a rap sort of really positive growth kind of curve for the company when you do bring in those that are really truly vested sort of in the success of your company and uh, really sort of full-time participants in that and really sort of excited to be a part of something that's really heading in a positive direction.
yeah, yeah,
Of course consultants have their value, of course, and but I think
yeah,
you'll be really excited when you get to that point of bringing
yeah.
some full-time people on.
That is the exciting part, is to be able to have somebody in that is not only obviously working on their career, but can see what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do, and hopefully while they're working on the CTO projects, they can kind of develop their career, and at the same time sort of balance that out, right, where they're progressing in their career at the same time helping CTO to kind of move forward and grow. Not that it's solely on them, right? I've still got a job to do, so keep me busy also. Um, yeah, speaking on, let's talk a little bit about your work directly with clients. I know the RFP process, the public works process, that your clients are kind of picked out for you, right? They're kind of, for the most part, set. Um, on the private side of things, how do you go about um, reaching out, maybe communicating to potential new clients? Do you have any kind of, you mentioned you went through a whole rebranding on your website for marketing purposes, I would imagine. Is there anything else that your team does to sort of communicate your work to other potential clients?
Yeah, the on the sort of luxury residential side, the sort of our biggest source of referral network really is architects that are ahead of us in the process. Sort of almost any project that an architect is working on, either it's a major renovation or new construction, ultimately needs a landscape architect, as part of it. So we've really found that developing the relationships with the architects, builders and developers those are key, and there's really no replacement for that personal connection. I mean, literally, a phone call, checking emails, sharing of, hey, just keeping them on your radar.
Yeah.
Thought you might be curious to see this. Just finished this project. That sort of outreach has been a big component.
Okay.
Even to the point of putting together some collateral marketing material that really speaks to that relationship and sort of what value we add to the process for the architects, sort of don't potentially sort of don't be sort of intimidated that we're going to either drag the process down or just try and respond to what their uh, hesitation might be to working with landscape architects,
Gotcha.
how we can really sort of enhance the process and not detract from it. So we've developed some sort of collateral marketing pieces based around that. And then, of course, the satisfied client to satisfied client is also was great. But
Yeah, yeah, I found that word of mouth is, especially when I starting out, 5 years ago, that word of mouth was huge. It was just telling people what I was doing and the type of work, and it was kind of surprising how many people would refer projects, or they get me in contact with someone they knew was looking for a landscape architect, that type of thing. Um, but yeah, yeah, excuse me. Yeah, those relationships are definitely key. Is there anything that have you had any had to deal with any difficult clients? How would that work out? How'd that work out?
great question,
You don't have to
for
give
sure.
any names or anything. Yeah.
Yes, I will keep those
Yeah.
in my pocket. Yeah, I've always sort of generally taken for better or worse, the client is always right, sort of mentality. We're landscape architects. We're not, you know, IRS auditors. We're not, it's a, we're in a, we make the world a better place. We're creating these beautiful environments for our clients, wherever they may be, whatever scope or scale they may be. So at the end of the day, I try not to take it, too seriously or get too upset by a client, or a project that sort of goes sideways for
Sure.
sort of whatever reason. And at the end of the day, we even if a client is difficult or project has its share of hiccups, I feel like I can sleep at night if at the end of the day, even if the project didn't go well, or with the person, at least if someone said, well, how did that project end up? Say, for whatever reason, X, Y, and Z was a problem, but at the end of the day, you know,
Sure.
Greg and his team did right by me, or they did they did they answer my question, or they appease me, or they whatever it is that we met our obligations, of course. Uh, and while for whatever reason, if it didn't go, the relationship ultimately didn't end well, they at least we did the right thing, and not every relationship is going to sort of project is going to run
Yeah.
smoothly.
I think it's fair to say that, which it's not a bad thing to not have those clients return. Is that, if that makes sense, right? Where, maybe you weren't a good fit during the project, and there's a potential for having that, you don't want to continue that relationship if it's just not going to work out, or if you're going to have the same issues or the same type of relationship moving forward in other projects. Sometimes it's best to just say, hey, no, we're not the best we're not the best fit, and let's move on. Yeah,
That's actually, I think the advice that I should also be following my own advice, but the interview should potentially is going two ways. You're when you meet a client, or you're feeling each other out, and better you understand them and who they are and what makes them tick. Not everyone is a fit. At the end of the day, it's hard to recognize that, especially when you're younger and getting started. And obviously, you don't sort of it seems crazy to like turn away any sort of business. And maybe it's just sort of not doing the second job. If the first one just clearly wasn't a fit, but having that discerning eye
Yeah.
is really could be valuable.
Yeah. And it's not like, it's not, there is value in that too. Right now, like I said, you can have that discerning eye from the get go. You can have those initial conversations, and maybe you start seeing those, um, like, for lack of a better word, red flags of what the client that you can potentially see might not be a good fit, and start to sort of filter those out, right? Um, at least that's been my my approach to trying to
That
find the right
yeah, that's a
clients.
perspective you
Yeah.
that's a perspective you'll sort of grow with the confidence and the age of the
Yeah.
company, and the more experiences. I mean, it's a fascinating. I feel like psychological, sociological study in what we do and all the different personalities and
Yeah.
the it's so it's you're really navigating that is it takes a skill.
Yeah.
It's a muscle you develop.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's interesting.
Yeah. Going back a little bit, Greg, what was your, you mentioned you had started working out of school. How did you find landscape architecture to begin with? Because I know I had no idea what landscape architecture was when I started college, and kind of, found my way into it. How did that work out for you?
Yeah, well before I knew what a landscape architect was, sort of in hindsight, I feel like it was sort of all leading to this moment. Truly, really cliche. I was sort of an outdoor kid. I'm really climbing the trees in my backyard, and how cool it was to look down on the world from up above, and that those sort of things. Went on sort of a transformative cross country trip, drive with my dad when I was 10 years old. Saw a whole lot of the country. The through the Shenandoah Mountains in Virginia to sunrise over the Grand Canyon to the redwoods out by you in California to just seeing sort of a huge spectrum of the country and all different environments and landscapes and typologies, and that was just really fascinating to me. Uh, that then translated into working on landscape construction crews and a nursery, a retail nursery in high school, literally carrying golf bags on a golf course, through high school. Some really great sort of mentors in the construction world, in high school, which I think is hugely valuable to sort of see the kind of working end of a shovel, see how the plan gets to fruition, and what's all the infrastructure that's buried underground before you even see the beautiful photograph project at the end. So that was hugely valuable. And then I literally applied to the landscape architecture program at Cornell at 18 years old, and just felt hugely lucky to have sort of known that at an early age, and fortunate to get accepted. And yeah, really had an amazing 4 years there with some really great professors. Yeah, that really set me up for success.
Yeah. And you stuck with it. At least you started working during college and just kind of kept going with it. Was that the
Yeah,
yeah, yeah?
not more
Did you
complicated than that.
did you ever think of doing, continuing that design build type of project of work, when you left your employer, or was it, yeah, I'm only doing landscape architecture type of thing?
No, it's a great question. In my 18 years, I have tried a few of the different possibilities
Yeah.
of how to run a company, and actually went so far as having construction crews. So I did give that a whirl, thinking, well, right, is it silly? I have the clients, I have the designs, they want me to see it through. Why wouldn't I just have the equipment and the construction personnel and the yard and the trucks and all that sort of stuff? So I did do that for 3 years. Um, Glad I did it, but in hindsight, sort of had to basically get out of my system to know that that was actually not the direction I ultimately wanted to go in. That really me out of my comfort zone a little bit in terms of the real logistics of having a construction company, and at that point I was, as I am today, but, was the sole, owner of the company. So it was a whole new set of uh, language that, I just wasn't that well versed in,
Yeah.
from, again, literally the trucks and the equipment and the repairs and the maintenance of the equipment and all those sorts of things. So um, great experience, loved it. And I feel there's an element of, trying things, so you sort of don't, wonder or have regrets down the road. But ultimately, I did decide that really I wanted to be a very, true landscape architecture firm that would, of course, have a oversight component to it, because I didn't want to lose that. Being a part of that of the construction is incredibly exciting to me, and and something I want to not lose sight of. But I discovered I didn't need to be a part of it at the true shovel and backhoe skid steer
Yeah.
level of it.
I imagine it just adds that level of complexity as the what your I guess your obligations, but also your level of risk, right? As far as delivering to the client, it's a like I've thought about that, and it's I see these other guys that are doing the construction work and how they're operating their teams and their business. I'm like, I don't know if I could do all of that. I'll stick to the landscape architecture, the design side of things for now. But
Successful versions of that, to me, it's almost, it's sort of two different silos of sorts. You'd have sort of your design office principle, and then your sort of construction you know principle. That sort of, just, I think it's extremely difficult, to be over the top of both and really be able to run both effectively
yeah,
and grow them
something
and
gets
such. You
lost.
can do, yeah, you can do it at a
Yeah,
certain level, but I would think that requires some level of sort of partnership or
right.
collaboration
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
successful.
Have somebody else handle the both sides, right? They're two different leaders that know their stuff. So moving forward, what does you mentioned you'd like to grow the team a little more in the near future. You got your internship program coming up. Do you have a one of the problems that I come across or have come across is, do I take these 10 projects on at once? Do I have to say no to some of those projects to keep my sanity, right, and be able to deliver the work on time? Um, has that been anything that you've seen? I'm sure you've had some form of it in the past 18 years, but is that something that you see being less of an issue as the company grows, where you can kind of distribute everything out? And does that still happen?
That is,
Yeah,
yeah, that is the answer. That is the answer there. I mean, I would take the work and figure out how to get it done.
yeah, yeah,
The whether it's, and obviously ideally growing, internal staff, and that, that just sort of grows organically. And having that, that's, there's a little bit of the chicken or the egg, right? Like, am I ready to hire that person? But if I don't hire that person, then I'm mired in the day to day, so I'm not growing the company. I'm sort of, you know
doing the
focused on
work. Yeah,
the nuts and bolts of it.
yeah,
So it's, a little bit sort of that chicken or the egg concept. But I feel sort of taking on the work, and then it'll just sort of help you psychologically get over the hump of, okay, now I need this team member. As soon as you bring on that team member, you're very quickly going to be like, I don't know how on earth I lived without that team member. Like, how did I possibly get this done without this, this person? And then it'll sort of grow that way. And something I've discovered, and this, in my 17th and 18th year doing this, there's an element, I mean, to really, if you have sights on growing the company to any significant level, you're going to have to let go of some things that's going to feel uncomfortable to let go of at first. Um, and that just literally happened for me this, in January of 2024, when I sort of brought on this, senior person, and, starting to sort of give over the reins and give over I wasn't going to necessarily be a part of the Monday meeting with the whole, all the junior staff members every week. And then, oh gosh, the panic. How would I know what's going on? And what do I,
right.
deliverables, and I'm going to lose I'm not going to be finger on the pulse, and all those sort of stresses. But okay, I mean, literally, it happened almost organically to the point that I was out of the office on a Monday, so I missed that Monday, series of meetings, and then when I was back on Wednesday, I was like, oh, the sky didn't fall. The office is still running. Maybe it can happen without me. And then we said next Monday, I was like, all right, let's intentionally sort of keep me out of it. And then we'll just sort of have a summary, one single kind of summary to keep me looped in. And, so you definitely have to, at some point, start to sort of, trust the people you've brought on, that you've trained and sort of brought up, and if you're going to kind of go through some growth, if that's your ultimate goal.
Yeah, it's funny because I've been at certain points. I'm like, all right, so do I hire them now? And then it's luckily it's not luckily, unfortunately, it's been to the point where I was getting ready to hire, and then I think three projects fell off. This was probably about 2 years ago, and if I had hired that person, it would have, it's that type of thing.
Right.
Things are a little more
Right.
structured now, a little bit more comfortable to get to that point to be able to say, okay, now we can hire, and we don't have to worry about that as much. But you never know, I guess. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's good to see
That
that
is
you
an
guys
interesting
have been
part of
growing.
what we,
Yeah,
yeah, no, it's an interesting part of what we do, right? That, typically a project ends, there's no annuity, there's no repeat. You're sort of back to zero when
yeah,
when getting the new project, you get the next project. Yeah. So I know those
right.
stresses for sure.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of well, I'm not speaking of, but there's been when I went to look for people to interview for the podcast, I do this thing where I just search for landscape architects in New York, for example, right? And I don't know if I was surprised, but there's a lot of landscape architects in New York, right? A lot of firms. What would you say distinguishes Bayview from the other firms that are, in the New York area? Maybe some of your competitors. What is that? How do you differentiate yourselves?
Yeah. Uh, well, I think that's actually, there's two sides to that, where I think it is important to differentiate yourself. Because I really genuinely believe we sort of have an internal client, which is the whole staff and the team we're creating, and the external client, which is obviously those that are retaining our services. But for the internal client, I feel like we're not going to have success unless our staff are sort of happy, talented, love to come to work, have opportunities to grow, to spread their wings, to gain new responsibilities. So office culture so is hugely important to me. I've had over the course of 18 years, I've unfortunately had some misses where, and the negative impact that a sort of bad cultural fit uh, within the office can truly uh, have an outsized effect on sort of the productivity and everyone's really sort of happiness in the office. Um, so we take a long time to hire. We sort of really have a pretty extensive interview process, where there's ultimately we have potential candidates come in and sort of sit with the entire team, all the members of the office at that point, uh, to tell us a little bit to educate the entire staff about who they are, to kind of talk through their portfolio, then have individual one-on-ones with each individual team members. Then we literally have a meeting the next day with almost like a scorecard measuring system to everyone sort of speak to uh, the candidate, and what sort of fit they think they'd be. Um, I'm really extremely sensitive to bringing in somebody that's ultimately not going to be a good cultural fit for the company. Um, and even in terms of our job posting, we've gotten some really positive feedback. Just the depth of our posting and how it really maps out, what you can expect in the first 6 weeks you're with us, the first
Yeah,
3 months, the first 6 months. Really, I don't want any surprises. The more people know, the more they understand who we are and what we are. The
they
better.
know what they're signing up for, right? Yeah,
They know what they're signing up for exactly, what the responsibilities are, um, and then just cultivating team sort of throughout their tenure with us, even sort of reimbursements on memberships in professional organizations, stipends to participate in sort of in local groups in the city. There's, as you mentioned, there is a fair amount of landscape architects, so there's a lot of groups dedicated to the industry, the trades, Urban Land Institute, American Society of Landscape Architects, AIA. If you want to engage more with architects. So there's a lot of opportunities to sort of New York Botanical Gardens, take classes and and network and just sort of grow your skill set. So I think that so our internal client is huge, and I would not be successful without this amazing team. So the internal client, which I think sets us apart, and that kind of comes through to then our outward facing clients, which of course those that that hire us. And I feel like it's what I hope comes across, and we kind of spend a lot of time to and hope it does. It's just that effectively that care we take to learn who they are, what makes them tick, what would make a successful project, and really have that be reflected in our designs. From very early on in our relationship with the clients, we actually have them fill out a questionnaire we've developed over the last few years that just affords them an opportunity to take 10 or 15 minutes. It's not we're not asking for an hour or two of their time, but actually instead of me just sort of interviewing them and going down the checklist and trying to sort of get a sense of who they are, have them sit for 10 or 15 minutes, with sort of a cursor blinking in front of them and just think of a few things that we could never, extract from them during the course of conversations. But just makes them tick. On the residential side, it might be, do they have pets? Any special combination for pets? Something, size of the dog, name of the cat. Do you have interest in vegetable garden growing? Would that be a fruit tree? Would that be a special plot area for vegetables? Try and zoom in a little bit on kind of what makes them tick, and truly ask, if we come back in 3 years, what would make this a successful project? It's a little bit of an abstract question
Yeah.
that give people pause, say, oh well,
They
I
don't
would
really
have
don't
but
typically think
if you
about that,
really
right?
think
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
yeah, if you really give it a little bit of thought, and consider what that might be, uh, you can really come up with some interesting answers that we can then again get that insight and learn about them and incorporate that from early on in the process
Yeah, it's a great
into the
question.
finished product.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
it's
I
a great.
really think with that communication, is a big one. I feel some of the arcs of some projects are really long, and I feel like if you didn't constantly stay on top of the communication, you could sort of be out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But I think it's crucial for our team to effectively weekly check-ins with the client, even if there's no update, say hi, check in on Friday. I don't know much has happened this week, but here's where we're at. We're waiting on the engineer's soil boring report. We should have that in 2 weeks. Have a great weekend. Just keep kind of your finger on the pulse. So sort of understanding the client and communication, I would say, are two really significant things
Yeah.
that I
That
think could be lost by some people. Yeah.
yeah, that checking in is I think it's huge. It's such a small little amount of effort, right? But I think it just speaks volumes to where you're at as far as the firm and how you treat your clients and have them just keep them up to date on where things are at and what you're doing. Um, do you have are there any new exciting projects? Anything that you can any of your favorite projects that you can speak about?
It's a great question. It's like your children. Do you have favorite children? Uh, it's cool. We have a couple of RFPs out. There's a biotech company is opening up I think their national headquarters in our area, and we submitted just before the Thanksgiving break an RFP to join that company. They have a really cool outdoor amenity space. That's just such a cool one to me. It can be such an interesting and branded space that just really speaks to the very unique users and what they do there, and it's like a diagnostic sort of laboratory space that actually we learned has a lot of overnight use. um, so that was even just a very cool concept
Yeah,
that just the lighting is going to be component is going to be hugely important for the success of the project. So literally is going to be sort of used, the space is going to be used 24 hours a day. um, so at least that's an RFP we're hoping comes through. um, we're doing one pretty high profile spot that's high in the sky, uh, just on just in the base of Central Park in Manhattan, with really some great views up
yeah, nice.
on the 51st floor. which has all sorts of cool nuances of wind issues and sort of some engineers that would have to be engaged in that process. But just in sort of a true iconic, Manhattan, New York City project, something that has that kind of perch overlooking Central Park would be really fun to work on.
Yeah,
Um,
very cool.
and then really seeing one of our first affordable housing campus in the Bronx effectively is in the permit phase. So they'll probably break ground in March, and that's going to be awesome to really see that all that work. That's roughly 9 months of design work and weekly calls and weekly meetings leading up to breaking ground, which should be March or April. Involvement involvement, and we have a construction administration sort of arrangement in place, so we will be involved in that, on a biweekly basis. So really seeing that start to rise out of the ground is really going to be exciting to
Yeah,
really be our
that's
first
awesome.
one and at that scale, and that will hopefully be able to build on obviously with future clients as well. So
Yeah, very cool. Cool, Greg. Well, we're coming up on the end of the podcast. Any advice that you'd give to people that are looking to get into or starting their career in landscape architecture? I don't know, anything that you can kind of give them as an advice.
sure, yeah. I think don't be afraid to reach out. I think I get a fair amount of emails and or LinkedIn messages or things of that nature that uh, I know I personally am sort of excited to help. I remember very clearly what it was like when I was starting out in the career
Yeah,
and sort of didn't know where I wanted to land uh, and to really date myself back then I certainly didn't have a Google search to do to learn about
yeah,
companies and make those connections where it's reasonably easy to do now. But sort of don't be afraid to reach out or ask for advice or um, I'm truly I'm happy to have a phone conversation or a Zoom call or uh, potentially connect someone if I'm not a fit. If they have a question and I'm not a fit, I'm happy to sort of pass them along to someone that might be a good fit. So I think people generally sort of want to help. They want to see the industry grow, and um, so don't be afraid to reach out. And one that I believe really strongly and sort of really molded me at an early age of my career was try and get out and see as much construction as you possibly can. Um, there's no replacement for boots on the ground, being on a construction site, seeing what's what. Even if you're not necessarily swinging the hammer or putting the shovel in the ground. Um, I'm sort of that guy who's peeking through the chain link fence on the construction site. See what's going on behind those little windows on the sidewalk. Um, Reach out to more construction groups. There's obviously all the book knowledge you sort of spoke on in terms of like running a business. We don't necessarily learn that in school. As much as you learn construction detailing from a black and white AutoCAD perspective, seeing what that actually means in the field, I just think is so vitally important to be able to design it effectively, efficiently, be able to have a dialogue with the trades that are bring your designs to life. I just think it's hugely important. So take advantage of that in
yeah.
any way you possibly can.
That's the kind of stuff that makes you a better designer, right? Overall, I think.
And on every level,
Yeah,
to communicate with other trades, to be respected. The more they know you know what you're talking about, and
yeah.
you've sort of seen the trenches a little bit, you'll just have a better dialogue and communication experience. So that's a big one.
All right, Greg. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time. And yeah, well, hopefully we can keep in touch. Appreciate you
My
hopping on the
pleasure.
podcast.
I really enjoy it. Thanks so much, Pablo.
Yeah, thank you.